You dog.
Hey everyone, so today I wanted to do a video on double merles. I feel like I've gotten a lot of questions about double merles, and I guess I didn't put out enough information about them, so hopefully this video will give you like a vast amount of information on what they are and why they have certain defects, if you want to call them defects, and just why you should be really selective on what breeder you pick for your Australian Shepherd or another breed that carries the Merle gene. So before we get started on what a double merle actually is, you have to understand two genetic terms, and one is dominant, one is recessive. So those two words are used to describe genes. So a dominant gene is going to be dominant over anything else that it's paired with. So let's say you have a recessive gene right here and you have a dominant gene right here. If they're paired together, that dominant gene is going to overtake a lot of the traits that are expressed by that recessive gene. So as long as there's a dominant gene, usually the dominant trait is going to be expressed. So a recessive gene is something that has to be paired with another recessive gene to be expressed. So both of those genes that get paired together have to be recessive so that it's expressed in the outward appearance of that animal. Now, a great example of this is blue eyes. So you can see I have blue eyes, and that is a recessive trait. Basically what that means is that my mother and my father had to each have one of those recessive genes, and I had to get both of them to express blue eyes. Now, the opposite of that would be brown eyes, right? So a brown-eyed person has a dominant gene that overshadows any recessive genes that are in there. So my dad, for example, has a recessive gene for blue eyes because I clearly got it, but he has brown eyes, which means that he has one dominant gene with one recessive gene, and the dominant brown-eyed gene took over what was expressed in him, so he has brown eyes. So now that you know what a recessive trait and a dominant trait are, we can apply that to merles. Now, the Merle gene is a incompletely dominant gene. It's a dominant gene. Now, let's say that you're breeding a black tri and a Merle. Okay, that Merle parent is going to introduce its Merle gene to some of its offspring. Now, those offspring that get that Merle gene are going to express that gene because it's a dominant gene. Now, because you're breeding that Merle to a black tri, the other gene that's going to be passed down to that offspring is kind of a solid coat color. So the Merle gene from the one parent that's a Merle is going to dilute that coat color, and it's going to create that Merle color pattern on the dogs. So now the way that you get double merles is that you have two parents that are merles that are bred together. So what this does is it creates puppies sometimes that get the Merle gene, the dominant gene, from the one parent because the one parent's a Merle, and they get that Merle gene from the other parent, and that puppy has two dominant Merle genes together. And because it's an incompletely dominant gene, it means that it just makes the Merle trait more expressed. So that's why we call it a double merle, because there's two Merle genes that are passed down to that puppy. Now the problem is that the Merle gene causes lightening, and when you have two dominant genes that are expressed in that same animal, it's going to cause excessive lightening. So the dog becomes almost white. There's some that get little patches of Merle color, but a lot of them are quite white. So statistically speaking, if you breed two Merles together, 25% of their offspring are going to be the double merle. Now, some of you might be saying, well, why is that bad? Right? But if you realize the health risks associated with that, it really is bad breeding. So let's get right into that. The two things that are seen with double merles is hearing deficiencies and eyesight deficiencies. So hearing deficiencies, just like any hearing deficiency, can be on a scale. It can be from like minimal hearing loss to complete deafness. So the eye deficiencies too, there's a spectrum. You can have differences in the pupil. Some people call it a starburst pupil. I'll put a picture in right now. And then sometimes you can see animals that have completely deformed eyes, eyes that are much smaller than they need to be. It's just not anatomically right. As we said, in the double merles, they lose pigmentation, a lot of pigmentation, because each of those genes call for lightening of the hair cells. There are pigmentation cells in your ears, and a lack of pigment in your ears causes a lot of problems, specifically with the cochlea. If you are familiar with anatomical terminology, especially of the inner ear, you'll know that the cochlea is essential for hearing, and specifically the place that it causes problems with is the stria vascularis, which is a part of the cochlea. So sometimes this can cause a little bit of a loss of blood supply to the cochlea, and that can cause degeneration of nerve cells and permanent hearing loss. So obviously for a dog that's going through all of that, it's not a fun thing. It's also very hard on the owners that have to bring up animals that have special needs. It takes a very special person to be able to have that kind of patience, and it requires a very special person, right? So just make sure that your breeders are knowledgeable about double merles, and please do not seek a breeder that specifically breeds for double merles. It's really not something that is responsible. But there's definitely a lot of double merles out there that are in shelters that really need homes. So if you're a person that has a lot of patience and really wants to help a special needs dog, a double merle it's a great dog to help. And one of the great things that you can do with that is you can help educate other people on the issues with double merle breeding. So whether that be taking them to a school and helping people understand, or even making a YouTube video and spreading the word. We definitely don't need dogs that have to go through these things. It's completely preventable. So I hope that this video has been helpful. I hope that you've learned a little bit more about Australian Shepherds and other breeds that have the double merle gene. And I'll see you guys very soon in another video. Take care. Bye. I have a visitor. Hi, sweetie. Come here. Where's my kisses? Where's my kisses? Oh, thank you, sweet girl. Oh, no, we're not going to mess with the lens.